Hello,
Hi, Ariel. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me and for
Okay,
reading my
it's a
book.
pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
It's a pleasure. So can you start by introducing yourself, telling us a bit about your background and what inspired you to become a writer?
for sure. My name's Shawnee Randolph. I'm originally from Washington State. Moved recently in the last couple of years to North Dakota, and I live here with my husband and my two daughters, who are 11 and 7 years old. And full time, I'm a marketing writer for the local community college here in Bismarck.
Mm-hmm. That sounds wonderful. What inspired you to specifically write the author and the illustrator?
Yeah, so I have a lot of inspiration that went into the book. When I was growing up, I really liked Harry Potter, the whole series, and The Hobbit. I also really liked books like E.B. White books, like Charlotte's Web and Roald Dahl books. Also, I really liked to watch movies when I was a kid. So there's a lot of pop culture references in my book that kind of show up, and so I just really love storytelling, and I think that kind of all of that inspiration just kind of manifested into the author and the illustrator.
Mm-hmm. Um, so that sounds actually a really nice way to get inspired. How did you come up with the title?
So the title, as you know, since you read it's reflective of two of the characters in the book. So I don't want to give away too much there, but it was just something that came to me. I really liked that it was simple and easy to remember. And the next couple books in the series will kind of follow that same format as far as the author and the illustrator. So just 4 words for each of the 5 words. So my next book, the working title is The Unwritten and the King.
Hmm. That actually sounds really interesting. And I love how in the end Jane goes off into the adventure, but I'm not gonna spoil too much of that.
For sure. Yeah, there's a lot more coming. I'm still working on it.
That sounds wonderful. I can't wait to read them.
Awesome. Yeah.
Um, so how do you come up with Jane and the group of characters that she goes off with?
Yeah. So Jane, actually, when I first started writing the book, Jane was a boy named Wesley. And so I just thought as I was writing, I'm like, there's so many boys uh, out there in fiction, like Percy Jackson and Harry Potter. So I just wanted a female lead character. And so I thought, well, I'm going to change this boy named Wesley to Jane. The name Jane actually comes from the spelling for the name comes from it's a old show called Firefly, and there was a character in there named Jane. But I was thinking as I was developing Jane that she was not just a plain Jane. Like she thinks she's just a plain Jane, but she's really not. There's a lot more to Jane, and so I wanted to just give it slightly unique spelling, and that's how I came up with her. And the other characters in the book, um, I knew she was going to need a lot of really strong supporting characters, and so you know, they come from a lot of different places, different like books that I've read and movies that I've watched, and they're not exact copies or anything of all of those characters, but they just have these different characteristics of different characters that I really liked when I was growing up.
Hmm. That
Yeah,
sounds like a really well detailed explanation, but simple in a good way.
yeah, for sure.
Thank you. So if you could have a superpower like Jane has in the book, what would it be?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So yeah, there are a couple superpowers in the author and the illustrator, and just a little hint in the next book, there's going to be a few more different superpowers that you're going to come across. But actually, mine would be teleporting, or like they do in Harry Potter when they apparate and disapparate. Because I like to travel, I like to go different places, and it would be so convenient if I could just pop into where I wanted to go.
Hmm. That actually, I've never thought of teleporting as one of my favorite superpowers, but now that you say it that way, that actually sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah, it would be convenient. Just be like, I'm gonna go visit family in Washington today, and then poof, there I am.
And then 2 seconds later, bye, I've gotta go, poof, back into your house.
Exactly. It'd be nice.
Mhm. Or and you could travel halfway across the world in 2 seconds.
Right. Yes. I'd love it.
Hmm. Sounds very convenient. Um, if you could describe your book in just 3 words, what would it be, and why would you choose them?
Yeah. So I was thinking about that one a lot, and I think maybe this is kind of boring because it's just kind of genres, but fantasy, adventure, and mystery. And
Mm,
that's, the fantasy is pretty much a given. There's a lot of fantasy elements in it. But then after I wrote and published the book, I was thinking about how much adventure and mystery are in the book as well. Like the beginning of the book really unfolds. You get a little bit of information each chapter that kind of gets you to the the big exciting point, and I it just kind of dawned on me that, oh, I kind of wrote a mystery, and then they go on this big adventure as well. That adventure was kind of really what stuck to me when I first came up with the idea of the book, is just this adventure that the kids go on,
mm,
to help rescue a friend, so
mhm.
yeah. So I just think kind of the genre and the subgenres is how I would describe it: fantasy, mystery, and adventure.
Are there any secret things in your book that people won't pick up just right away?
Yes, so I did build in a few Easter eggs. So because I am a Harry Potter fan, if you can think back to a certain character, she has slippers, and she has different types of slippers, and those represent four different things within the Harry Potter universe. Can you guess what those are? Do you
The
remember?
four houses?
Yep. Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple
Because
other
if you
ones
notice,
as
they're like
well.
all different, the say those colors.
Yep, those colors and the animals. Yep, for sure.
Are there any interesting or memorable experiences that happened in your life that influenced into the book?
Yeah, I think the main one is just where it was set on the Oregon coast. So I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I was born in Washington State, Southwest Washington, and I lived in Oregon for about 10 years. And I spent a lot of time on the Oregon coast. I just lived an hour and a half away. So a lot of time searching for sand dollars and building fires on the beach, and going into the towns and getting taffy and ice cream, and flying kites, and whale watching and all kinds of really fun stuff. And so that's probably the biggest part of it, is just where it's set. It's such a nostalgic place for me, and so it's kind of a
Well,
special place in my heart.
that sounds really fun for a childhood.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
Like
great
if I
place
could
to
just
go.
run
And in
on the
fact,
beach all day, eating a
uh,
taffy, something, or having ice cream, that would be a dream.
oh yeah,
Sounds
it's a
great.
fun place. Just kick off your shoes, get the sand in between your toes, build sand castles. It's one of my favorites. In fact, every time we go back to Washington, I make sure that we visit the beach. So,
Hmm. And in here in Florida, we also have a lot of beach, and the thing is, it gets hot, and
yeah,
then I get cranky, and I don't want to get in the water.
that's very different from the Oregon beaches, because there it's usually pretty cold. Sometimes you'll have a nice day, but it's usually cold and kind of misty, and sometimes it can get miserable because you'll be wet before you even get into the water. But there are nice days there, and so it's a good place to
Mhm.
go.
Yeah. So can you tell us about your process of writing the book?
For sure. So it took me a really, really long time to get around to writing the book. I got the idea for the book back in like 2008 or 2009, right after I had graduated from college, and I wrote down a couple chapters, and then I kind of just, I don't know why, but I couldn't write the book. There was something holding me back, and so I would just think about the book and think about it, and I'd go back and I'd try to write some, and then I just couldn't write anymore. So there was a lot of years of just thinking about the book, and then thinking that I had to be perfect with writing the book. So that held me back a little bit. But then after my second daughter was born, about 2016, I really decided I was going to sit down and just start writing. and kind of just forget about all the rules that I didn't know, because I was worried there were rules I didn't know on how to write a book. And so I just started writing, and that was the first step. Just get it all out onto paper,
Mhm.
and then start editing it and refining it. I think by second or third draft, I got it to beta readers to just read through and tell me what they thought, and do some, fix the storyline a little bit. So then I did another draft or two, and then I sent it to an editor. She's a developmental editor. So then she just went through and she kind of did the same thing as the beta readers did, but more in depth. So she made sure that all of the pieces of the story kind of connected and told me where I could do better. And so that was another draft or two after that. Then I had a proofreader, a couple more beta readers, a proofreader, and that was that. Then I had to format the book and do all that fun stuff and get some advanced readers. So it was really quite the process. It was a book, very long time in the making, about 15 years in the making. But it was about 2016 when I finally sat down to write it.
Mhm. And now that I think about it, the book is titled The Author and the Illustrator. In this case, if you're the author, um, let's say, since there really isn't an illustrator for the book, what about the cover artist? The cover I really
Yeah.
liked, and the way they did those like streams of, I don't know, magic or energy around her hand.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that you really liked it. I the I had a first cover that I had hired an artist, and it, through it's a website called Fiverr. So I hired them through that, and he got my concept down like perfectly, like what I was looking for, but it just didn't, it felt off. The character felt too old, and it wasn't like illustrated looking, so it didn't really match the tone of the book very well. And then so I don't actually know who the illustrator is for the cover of this book, because I went through another website called Get Covers, and they do a really, really wonderful job of, I gave them my concept and my idea, let them know I needed a little bit more action than the first cover. And they nailed it. They gave it that kind of illustrated vibe to it. And, but yeah, I really wanted to make sure that that red door was there, which you don't even find out until really, closer to the end of the book,
Mm-hmm.
what that's about. But it's kind of a doorway into the next book as well. So,
Mm-hmm. You know, a doorway to the next book. That actually sounds pretty nice.
yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's literally how they, start the next book. So,
Which is pretty funny.
yeah.
So, how long did it take to write the book after, not like about the thinking process, but once you started getting down, how long would you say it took?
That took me, let's see. I'm trying to think of when I moved here, and so 2016, and then I published it last year. So 7 years,
Oh wow. Well, I
which I
mean,
don't recommend. I don't recommend taking that long to write a book, because you forget what you wrote, and then you have to go back and figure out what you've already written and all of that. But it's just something I had to do, get over myself as I was writing, because I was so worried I was
mhm.
doing stuff wrong. And so yeah.
What message or theme do you hope young readers will learn from this book?
Yeah. So I think like one of the biggest themes that goes through the book, and just kind of a teaching moment, I think, for kids, and I don't know that it's often talked about with kids, is just kind of the grieving process. Because Jayne goes through quite a bit of grief, and she goes through a lot of different emotions. And I don't know that all kids would know that not only are you going to be sad when you have something, big and sad happen in your life, but you might be angry, you might be questioning things. There's a lot of different emotions and kind of steps that happens with grief. So that's just kind of like a teaching moment. I think though that the biggest, I guess, takeaway with the theming is just that friends can come in all kinds of different places. Jayne
Mhm.
is kind of like, in the beginning of the book, she's in her own little, very close knit world, even though she lives in Portland, Oregon, which is a big town. But it's really just her mom, her dad, and her best friend. And that's, she kind of just keeps to herself. And then she goes off into this foster home, where there's all these kids and, foster mom, and they really do become like her, her family and her friends, and it's not very expected. And then she meets a lot of other friends along the way. And so just that friends come in all different shapes and sizes, ages, and then also you can learn a lot from each other, and really build each other up if you surround yourself with the right people.
How has writing changed you?
How has writing changed me? That's a good question. I think that finally getting through writing the book kind of, I guess it kind of gave me my voice. I have always liked writing stories. Even when I was a kid, I would write all these different stories. And like I said, I loved reading books and watching movies, and just the art of storytelling has always been really super intriguing to me. And one of the things actually that's happened since really starting to write my book and really going through the editing process and everything, it gave me a lot of confidence. And so I haven't always, since graduating from college, I haven't always been a full-time writer. And so finishing the book gave me the confidence to pursue a job in writing. And so now I get to do that full time as well, and tell a different type of story, which it sounds weird to say that with marketing, but really with marketing, you do tell a story. The story of your brand and the story of the people who go, in my case, the people who go to the college. And so, yeah, I think that's how it changed me. It just gave me my confidence back.
Well, I'm glad it did.
Yeah. And I'm looking forward to writing the next one, or finishing it.
I think it'll be great.
Awesome. Thank you.
If you could give one piece of advice to kids who are becoming writers, what would it be?
I would say just write. Just write it all down, get it on paper. Even if you think it's terrible and awful, you can always go back and edit it. You can always go back and get feedback. But if you have that story in your brain that's just not letting up, kind of like my story did, it was bugging me for like 7 years before I really started to sit down and write it. Just write it and get it down onto paper. And then from there, you learn so much in the editing process. That's where I really learned a lot. Like I had to go back and relearn like grammar, like, and that kind of stuff. And then just different, like how the plot flows. You learn all that when you edit. So I would say just write, just get it down onto paper. And then from there, you can start that process of kind of learning how you're going to build your story.
I think that when you explain it like that, it sounds like I want to start writing right now.
Yeah,
I
you
hope
should.
that a lot of kids understand that through this.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it really is just that. I think that's the biggest hang up for people is they think they got to do it all perfectly. That was me. I had all these books about writing, and I was going to read. I probably bought like 15 books on writing a kid's book. And for some reason, I never did read those books because they kind of just stressed me out, like thinking I had to learn all this stuff. And so literally what happened was I threw those books away, and then I started writing my book because it was like, woof, I don't even have to worry about those rules anymore. I did rebuy some of those books because they were helpful, and I didn't throw them away. I donated them, but I mean, sometimes you just got to go for it and do it.
I don't think that, like earlier in the interview, you said that you were worrying about the rules you had. I don't think there are any rules to writing except that I mean there isn't really any rules.
Right. Yeah. I mean, knowing that a story has a beginning, middle, and end, that's the main thing that you need to know. Right.
What do you enjoy doing for fun?
I do yoga. I actually taught yoga for 10 years. I haven't gotten back into it since I do yoga for myself, but I haven't got back into teaching since moving to North Dakota,
What
but
is
that
hot
is a
yoga?
goal. Yeah. Yeah. I taught yoga. So, towards the beginning of the book, you see a yoga cat doing yoga in the book. I don't know if you remember that, but yeah, that's where that comes from.
Yeah. And that's actually super funny, a cat doing
And
yoga.
right. And those animals in the beginning of the books, those were actually my animals growing up. I also like to cook, which you probably noticed that maybe that I really like to cook, and I really like food based off of Annie and her character and how much she's cooking. And I also like to, like I said, I like to travel and just get outside, like go on hikes
Mm-hmm.
and go kayaking and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. That sounds wonderful. And by the way you describe Annie's cooking, I think that maybe, I don't know, part-time you should open a restaurant.
Right. I mean, I love cooking. I think that yeah, maybe Annie should open her own restaurant.
Are you planning to write more books after The Unwritten and the Key?
Yes, so there is going to be 3 books total in the Author and the Illustrator series. I don't have a working title yet for the 3rd book. And then I do have another series in mind. It would be for a younger age group. So the Author and the Illustrator is it's really for kids like 10-ish to maybe like 15-ish. So really that kind of preteen, older elementary age. Not that younger kids can't read it too, but the other series I'm looking at is for a younger age group. So I would say like 7 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
and
sort of stuck
another
in the middle because I'm 8.
great, great.
Yeah.
Well, and that's okay. I have had some younger kids read the book as well and really enjoy it. I think it just depends on your reading level and what you enjoy. So
Well, I enjoy all books, so I just might even read your younger, like 7 to books because
yeah.
I just enjoy reading the book and finding what output it's.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just, I think it's so important. My girls are big readers as well, and we really, we read every day. And my oldest, she's in the 6th grade, and she has, I don't remember how many books she told me she read this year so far. Last year, she read something like 125 books. And so it's just super important. It's good for your brain. And if you want to be a writer, that's one of the most important things to keep doing is reading if you want to be a writer.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like a really good lesson, and I appreciate the way you put it.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
Well, thank
So
you
thank you
so
so much for your
much.
time. It was a pleasure meeting you.